The Fallout Wasteland isn't one endless ruin, it's dozens of different worlds. New California's scorching deserts couldn't be more different from Appalachia's green hills or Maine's fog-shrouded coast. These wastelands are still divided by the old state lines, each with its own survivors, dangers, and secrets. Some we've explored, others we've only heard whispers about. This is every known state in Fallout. Maine lives in eternal fog. The coastal state escaped direct nuclear strikes, but gained something arguably worse: endless twilight where the sun never breaks through. Our main interaction with it during the series is through the Fallout 4 DLC Far Harbor, which represents Maine perfectly, a suspicious island community that treats all outsiders as threats, whether they're Institute synths or children of Atom fanatics. Even their soda brand Vim exists nowhere else. Maine was isolated before the war and remains that way centuries later. Mysterious shores where strangers aren't welcome. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts and setting of Fallout 4 trades Maine's fog for something far worse: endless war. Massachusetts remains heavily urban, centered around Boston's colorful steel-plated ruins. Dozens of independent settlements house settlers trying to rebuild, but they're caught in a three-way conflict. The Institute creates synths and super mutants underground. The Brotherhood of Steel shakes down locals for supplies from above, and in the southeast lies the Glowing Sea, a massive crater where Boston once stood, still spewing radioactive storms across the region. Massachusetts has incredible potential, but it needs someone to tip the balance and end the violence once and for all. The fate of the state of New York isn't fully known to us, but from what little has trickled in from Wasteland travelers, it's a grim place indeed. Based on what we can put together, New York City was directly hit by an extremely powerful nuclear blast, which leveled most of the metro area, transforming it into a tangle of broken concrete and twisted rebar. To generate such a huge explosion, it's unlikely that the warhead that dropped there was the less destructive but more radioactive traditional atomic bomb, and much more likely the result of a hydrogen bomb, which can flatten whole cities but gives off less lingering radiation. The result? New York likely has fewer ghouls and mutants than anywhere else. The biggest crater in America might also be one of its cleanest battlegrounds. Going from a relatively clean state to one that's filthy in a whole different way, New Jersey is a state overrun. From the east, the ocean floods ever higher, gobbling up more and more of the state after the bombs shattered the coastline. From the west, further inland, the Pine Barrens press into the flooded city, bringing with it creeping plant-like monsters and a genuine, real-life Jersey Devil. All the while, human monsters in the form of mobsters and organized crime hold the city in an iron grip, transforming it into a center for leisure and gambling, even as the state slowly collapses around them. The exact opposite of its neighbor New York, Pennsylvania was one of the first states hit by the bombs that cleansed the earth of civilization, and it never recovered. The skies above Pittsburgh are a rusty, unhealthy red, and the industrial runoff, smog, and other pollution that settle amongst its broken skyscrapers have mixed with the bomb's radiation to create a truly nightmarish state to call home. A weeping sore of mutagens, pollution, radiation, and other industrial poisons, the city affected everything around it, with the toxic environment taking its toll on any survivors, leading to them degenerating into madness, cannibalism, and troglyphication, transforming into feral, inhuman beasts. These trogs, the horrible environment, and the raiders that fired up the thriving slave trade in Pittsburgh make the entire state of Pennsylvania a living hell for anyone foolish enough to pass through. It is, without a doubt, one of the most twisted, depressing, and downright hostile places in the whole series. Maryland and DC. These two regions, a state and a special district, are closely connected in the Fallout series, playing host to the Capital Wasteland and Point Lookout. Maryland and DC were hit particularly hard during the war, as the seat of the United States government, the city of Washington, D.C., was smashed to rubble, with its winding gray streets still awash with radiation and the disgusting mutants that developed from it. It also plays host to the super mutants of Vault 87, a much bloodthirstier breed than their West Coast cousins, who raid all across the ruins, looking for loot and fresh victims to transform into new mutants. To make matters even worse, the groundwater of Maryland and DC is heavily poisoned by radiation, making fresh drinking water a constant worry. As the playground of the nation's elite in industry, military, and politics, however, there's plenty of advanced technology and priceless history waiting just below the surface, which has attracted the attention of a much more charitable branch of the Brotherhood of Steel under Elder Lyons. South of the city lies Point Lookout, a fog-shrouded swamp home to mutated violent locals, ancient pre-war rivalries, and a dark secret that can drive visitors insane. Virginia and West Virginia are collectively known post-war as Appalachia, named after the mountain range that cuts through their territory. Appalachia escaped the bombs but faced something worse. The earth itself turned against its people. This diverse landscape of forests, mountains, and industrial ruins became a hunting ground for massive scorch beasts that emerged from deep caverns. These mutated bats spread a horrific plague that drives people mad, peels their skin, and turns them against their own neighbors. The infected eventually become motionless, ashen statues scattered across the wilderness. Appalachia has incredible natural resources and stunning beauty, but it remains cursed. A two-state blight where the very land is the enemy. One of the less explored states post-war, Illinois' identity in the world of Fallout primarily revolves around the city of Chicago, which seems to be an extremely popular stopover destination for Wastelanders traveling across the ruins of the US. The most famous of these wanderers would have to be the Brotherhood of Steel, who launched a fleet of airships across the country to hunt down and exterminate super mutants left over from the Master's army. Though many of them were shot down or scrapped for parts, one crash-landed in Chicago, establishing an impromptu chapter who went on to roam the Midwest in Fallout tactics. New Vegas's EDE Ibot was sent on his own cross-country mission on behalf of the Enclave from Adams Air Force Base in DC to Navarro in California, a journey of almost 3,000 miles across hostile territory. One of the only reasons he made it so far was a pit stop in the Windy City and the help of a family well-versed in robotics. It's no wonder they're familiar with the tech, as Chicago plays host to not only a secretive Enclave cell, but is on the front line of a war between the Midwest Brotherhood and a force of combat robots led by a mad AI known as the Calculator. It certainly paints Illinois as a unique state in the Wasteland, one of crossing paths, weary travelers, and advanced tech, all drowned in the endless icy wind off Lake Michigan. Like Illinois, Texas has never been visited in the main series, only the spin-offs, but does have an important role to play in Fallout. The famous Desert Rangers, vigilantes, and roaming lawmen that tried to bring order to the southwest of the devastated United States trace their lineage back to Texas and the traditions of the Texas Rangers. Some of the most skilled and fierce fighters and survivalists in any wasteland, these new Rangers spread across Nevada and beyond, fighting mutants, raiders, and monsters that prey on good, honest folk. And so, though Texas is never seen directly, its influence can still be felt in one of the most iconic organizations of the series. The mountainous state of Colorado is a place of contrasts, home to not only thriving tribal communities, but also serving as the center of power for the Calculator's robotic forces, who menace the wasteland all the way to Illinois. Deep in the Cheyenne Mountain complex in the Rockies is Vault Zero, designed to be a control and communication station for every other Vault Tech facility in the US. Due to budget cuts, the facility meant to coordinate every vault instead declared war on humanity itself. Meanwhile, Denver tells a darker story. The Hangdogs tribe lived alongside the city's feral dog packs, seeing them as spirit animals. When Caesar's legion arrived, they fought fiercely to defend their territory. The legion's response was brutal. They burned the dogs alive in massive bonfires, breaking the tribe's spirit and adding another conquest to their empire. New Mexico and Arizona. Immediately following the war and for decades afterward, the states were overrun by particularly vicious raiders. With so few resources available in the barren landscape, people simply weren't able to organize into groups large enough to fight off the bandits, leaving the region in violence and chaos. Caesar's legion changed everything. Their brutal conquest united the warring tribes under one banner, transforming the region from a raider-infested nightmare into one of the safest territories for travelers and merchants. From Flagstaff to the great city of Tucson, lawbreakers faced extermination under the Bulls' savage justice. And so it was that one of the most brutal and warlike factions in the history of Fallout transformed a kingdom of bandits into perhaps the most peaceful place in the Wasteland. In Fallout, the state of Wyoming is a land of endless, unforgiving frost and isolation, the graveyard of countless tribes that sprung up after the Great War. With little shelter from the endless winds and a bitterly cold winter that could freeze whole communities solid, the nuclear winter that Mojave residents keep going on about seems to be in full force in Wyoming. Only the hardiest can make it work in its frigid expanse, such as the Great Khans, who, if convinced to leave the Mojave peacefully, establish an advanced nomadic civilization with the help of the followers of the apocalypse. Lesser groups simply stand no chance, such as the Whitelegs of Utah, who after being driven into the wilderness by Joshua Graham and the Dead Horses tribe were decimated by the state's brutal winter before being scattered by the winds, never to be heard of again. Before their destruction in Wyoming, the warlike Whitelegs haunted the state of Utah. A place of unspoiled natural beauty, Utah has vast tracts of land free from lingering radiation where life still manages to thrive. The most famous of these places is Zion National Park, a haven for peaceful tribes and a welcome respite from the constant warring all around them. At least, that's the way it used to be. The shadow of the Legion looms large over Utah, and within it, the more warlike tribes strike out against their neighbors. The first to fall was New Canaan, a wealthy city of merchants, farmers, and Mormons on the shores of the Great Salt Lake and the home of Joshua Graham, the Burned Man. They followed Joshua all the way to Zion, bringing war to canyons that had escaped the bomb's devastation. Now even paradise bleeds, and only time will tell what emerges from the trials ahead. Nevada revolves around one shining beacon: New Vegas, still open for business centuries after the bombs fell. The city sits at the crossroads between the expanding NCR to the west and Caesar's Legion to the east, both hungry for conquest. However, the real prize of Nevada is the Hoover Dam. The still functioning dam powers the city and most of the state alongside it, and even in more developed regions like New California, that much electricity is something to kill for. And kill they have. Nevada has hosted the largest single conflict the Wasteland has ever seen, with thousands fighting over the dam and the Mojave Wasteland as a whole. All one side needs to win. The NCR, the Legion, or Vegas itself is a lone courier who can rig the game and come out on top in the City of Sin. Oregon returned to wilderness after the war, but it sparked one of the most important quests in Fallout history. When the bombs dropped, the vast majority of survivors fled to the hills, forests, and mountains, creating a rich patchwork of tribal societies that established themselves as effective hunters and farmers, making use of the lush woodlands and abundant mutant game. At least, that was the case until the droughts and plagues of 2241, which pushed the Chosen One to leave the village of Arroyo in search of a Gek and kick off the story of Fallout 2. Since then, it became a much bleaker place. Geckos still roam the Oregon hills, supporting communities of trappers and hunters, but members of the Slavers Guild now patrol its southern reaches, snatching up lone wanderers or even whole villages. Settled towns like Klamath don't protest, as any less competition over the skin trade is fine by them, and all pray that the geckos and their hides still stick around. By 2281, Oregon joined the NCR as the state of Arroyo, finally finding some stability in the rugged frontier. The state that started it all, Fallout's New California, has a long and storied history that stretches way back to the first entry and has lasted from the 2160s all the way to the late 2270s. Fallout 1, 2, New Vegas, and the TV all either heavily feature or are entirely contained in California. It's an unforgiving wasteland, sandblasted by the heat and glassed by concentrated nuclear strikes. Nevertheless, it endures and even prospers, being possibly one of the most densely populated and prosperous regions left in North America. Through the wonders of the GEC, crops can grow in its sandy soil, and through the efforts of visionaries like President Tandy, the warring towns and factions of California can be united into a single powerful nation. The Californians have fought against the Master's mutant marauders, the Enclave's murderous supremacy, and even the Brotherhood's technological might, and have always come out on top. But now, Vault-Tec itself has returned to destroy what the NCR built. Thriving cities have been bombed back into junkyards like Philly, the old world devouring the new. If history holds, California will bounce back stronger than ever. The only question is, under whose flag? In the Fallout 3 DLC operation, Anchorage, Alaska is placed front and center, the battleground for the majority of the Sino-American War that preceded the apocalypse. It's only ever visited through an ancient battle simulator made by the US Army. As a result, it's difficult to tell what Alaska looks like in Fallout's current timeline, but it's possible to make an educated guess. Based on Operation Anchorage, Alaska is likely a place scarred by more of a traditional war than a nuclear one. Filled with old war material, any survivors in Alaska would have a treasure trove of weapons and other military tech on their hands, but would also have to contend with a few unique dangers. The Chinese used plenty of biological and chemical weapons during the war, and it's easy to imagine those agents becoming locked in the permafrost, emerging every few decades to wreak havoc on the Alaskan wastelanders. Frozen landmines could strike at any moment, and the nuclear winters of Alaska could freeze all but the most dedicated survivalists solid. It would be one of the highest risk, highest reward states ever featured in a Fallout game, a place of terrible danger and dazzling riches, if only were those brave enough to make the long trek north to seek them. And there you have it. Every known state in the Fallout universe, from the fog-shrouded coasts of Maine to the sun-scorched deserts of California. But our map is far from complete. The truth is, we still don't know what happened to the vast majority of America's states. What became of Florida's swamps? Did Montana's mountains provide shelter from the bombs? Are there survivors rebuilding in Kansas, or have Michigan's Great Lakes frozen over permanently? That's where you come in. What do you think happened to the states we haven't seen? Which ones would you most want to explore in a future Fallout game? Drop your theories in the comments below. Maybe your vision of post-apocalyptic America will inspire the next chapter in the Wasteland story.